Hi, I'm Natalie Sass, grandmother of Jimmy Sass, and I want to start and tell you the story of my life. I was born the seventh child of Joseph and Concetta Belmosto. I have four brothers and four sisters.
Yeah.
My oldest brother's name was Jimmy, Ernie, sister Frisia, Angie, Josephine, then me, my brother Tony, my sister Connie, my younger brother Jerry. I am now will be 89 years old, 2/23/23. I was born on the 22nd of February, but back in the olden days, babies were born at home and it didn't get registered to the next day because of the holiday on the 22nd. So my birthday was recorded, my father recorded it as 2/23/23. So I will be 89 years young. I grew up in a family of 9 children with my mom and my dad, and then I married at 17 and I had my first son at 18. I now have 4 children. My oldest son will be 71. My second son is 67. My daughter will be 59, and my youngest son Jerry will be 55. I have 15 grandchildren and 25 great grandchildren, which I love each one of them dearly. God has blessed me with a good life, and I love each and every one of my siblings and my children. Well, my mother and father were both born in Italy.
Yeah.
My mother's father and mother owned a store, and they were kind of rich. My father, when he grew of age, he became an Italian cavaliero, which is a police officer, rides a horse in Italy. And they met, and they lived 15 hours apart. And my father met my mother, and he liked her, and he fell in love with her, and they took off and came to America, and they eloped, and they came to this country.
Yeah.
And my father got a job down in Braintree, and my mother was a homemaker. My father became a cobbler that fixes shoes. And then years later, he bought all the remnants of leather from the Commonwealth Leather Company over there in Whitman, Mass. And we went into a leather business, which he made good money at. And they used to call us the millionaires of Quincy Street in 1936 because we're the only ones around that owned two brand new 1936 automobiles.
Yeah.
That's how they raised us on the money from that. And then they sent my mother a letter telling her mother died in Italy, so she would go back there and they could keep her there, but she wouldn't stay there. So she had my oldest brother at the time, and they came back to Braintree to stay with my father, and they raised 9 kids. My mother had taken a bag of jewelry from her father's store when they eloped, and that's how they settled here in Brockton. And then they grew. They raised the family of 9 children. My father lived to 1949, and my mother lived to 1973. But my brother Ernie went in the United States Army, and my brother Jerry was in the Marines after World War II. He became a lieutenant in the Brockton Fire Department afterwards. My brother Ernie owned his own store down in Braintree.
Yeah.
My brother Jimmy was a great violinist.
That's right.
So now I and my brother Jerry, the only 2 living children of the Belmostos. He's 81 and I'll be 89. I met my husband Joseph at a shower for my sister Ann in 1939. He was a box maker in Clafton, Randolph, Mass. And I was a stay home with my mother, who had a belt business, and we made leather belts to sell to to people that wanted to peddle them on the street in Mattapan and Boston, Mass. Uh, my husband-to-be bought the shower ticket to go to my sister's shower, and he met me, and he liked my looks, and he asked me for a date. So that's how I met him. I met him in 1939 and married him in 1940, September of 40. He passed away on March 16th of 1996, and I've been a widow all these years. So, but I love my life, and I love the way my son Jerry especially treats me, and my daughter Paula, and I have nice two other sons. My grandchildren are all good to me, and my great-grandchildren, I love each and every one of them. He was 26 years of age, and I was 21, and we had two children. One was 2.5, Joseph, and my son Tony was just 3 weeks old. He was sent to San Diego, California, and was put aboard the ship USS New Jersey, which he went to the Pacific in Japan twice in those 2 years. He came back home in January of 47.
Yeah.
And we resided in Randolph all our lives. Papa was in World War II. I worked at the American Fireworks up on High Street in Randolph.
Yeah.
That made ammunition for the war. And I also worked in Hanover where they made TNT. And me, that I was always scared, never thought of blowing up while I was there, but I thought about it after I left there. And I raised the two kids until he came home.
Yeah.
My oldest son, Joseph, which was 2.5, and my son, Tony, that was born right before my husband left. He was born April 26th of 44, and my husband went in the service May 18th of 1944. And then back in 1959, on May 18th, we moved in the new house on 9 Concetta Sass Drive. So the 18th of May seemed to be real important in our lives.
Yeah.
Most of my life, till I was about 70 years old, I was a waitress. I worked at a bar and club from 1949 to 1976. I worked at Howard Johnson's in Randolph for about 10 years. I worked at the Friendly's Ice Cream in Randolph. I worked at the Randolph Country Club that my brother-in-law bought after he came home from World War II. It was a beautiful Swedish club, and he made it into a nice club. And that's what I did until I was almost 7 years old. I waited on table until one day I said, what am I doing waiting on table? Somebody should be waiting on me. God, Jim, I used to work 12, 14 hours down the bar with high-heel shoes on.
Oh my
Now I can't
God.
even get them on and wear them around the house.
So
Get dressed all up like I was going out for night.
I'm sure you look great.
I did. And I was never ashamed to tell anybody how old I am because I always thought I looked good for the age I am. People come to the door now and say, boy, Natalie, you don't change.
No, you really don't, though.
know? I never had a car.
Well, tell me about the first car you drove.
The first car I ever drove was a 1932 Chevrolet because my husband and his brother owned a 1940 Pontiac together. And when we got married, he bought our share of the car. And my other brother-in-law was selling a car for $25, which was a 1932 Chevy. And we drove that. But one day I was coming home from my mother and father's house, and my husband had let me drive, and we're coming over a bridge, and I shifted and I broke the axle. We were going to a Christmas party that night at the factory where he worked. And of course, my husband was quite upset with me because I broke the axle in his car. And then my brother-in-law went into service and went in the Navy and was aboard the USS Antietam aircraft carrier. And before he went in, he sold his share back to my husband. So the 40 Pontiac went back and forth for a few years.
Yeah.
And that's the car that I drove during World War II. Was a 1940 Pontiac.
Yeah.
So back in 1984, my son Jerry bought this house, and he built us an addition on the other house. Because he kept saying he was going to move to New Hampshire. And
Dad did? He always said he wanted to.
They wanted to move to New Hampshire, and
Yeah.
I figured maybe we could con him into buying this house. So he did. And then he had his son Michael and his son Jimmy and his son little Jeff. And then him and his wife, ex-wife now, built a house down in Halifax. And he raised his children down in Halifax.
Yeah.
I always call them, even my prayers to this day, our boys, Mike, Jim, and Jeff. They lived here with us, and they grew up as our children. Though they have parents of their own that loved them, we loved them too. Every Sunday morning when we were kids, we get into the two cars and we'd either go to New Hampshire. We went to every state in New England but Vermont.
Yeah.
We'd go to Radio City Hall, we'd go to Kennedy Lake, we'd go to Boardwalk in Atlanta, Georgia, we'd go to Radio City Hall. We'd go there and stay a couple hours and turn around and come back. Or we'd go visit people over the Washington Bridge in New Jersey. You know, you go over from New York to New Jersey over the Washington Bridge. And then we'd go to the beaches, but we weren't allowed to go to the water because we would drown. We'd walk along the beach. We didn't have any money to buy hot dogs and stuff, you know.
Yeah.
Another peck of lunch. But we were together on Sundays, where most families today spend the time in their rooms, or everybody goes everywhere, right?
Yeah.
We were a family that stayed together, really, until we all sprung our wings and took off and got married. We never went anywhere and stayed overnight or went I never left home until I got married. You know, you never stayed with a friend or you never got that close. There wasn't any room for anybody to sleep anyways, you know. I never had a bed till I got married. Always slept on the couch. So, life was different, but I think you appreciate family life more. We all sat around at supper time and ate. We had turns doing the dishes, you know. It wasn't always just one person doing one thing. I can never remember mother washing the floor or doing the dishes. Most mothers do, you know, took turns. And my brother Ernie used to tell me, I'd say, watch over the train, watch over, and he'd say, Jesus, Nally, go to sleep, will you? And he used to call me Grandma because I used to have to know everything, but I loved my brother Ernie. Your father was surprised when I said he thought I liked my brother Tony more, but I know I loved my brother Ernie. He was so nice to me.
What would he do for you?
I would always make sure I got in his car. And I'd tell him, watch over the train, watch over the train track, watch over that car. Go to sleep, Nally. I'd stay awake every minute.
Why would you stay awake? You just wanted to
Because I
know
was
everything?
afraid I didn't want to get hurt and not know I got hurt. It was stupid.
Yeah.
Well, I got hit by a car twice. I was nervous. I didn't want to get in the car. I used to scream, don't let me in, they'll kill me. When I was a child, I get hit by a car twice. That's why I get nervous getting in the car. One time I was going to First Communion classes, and I get hit by a car. And the first time when I was 5, we didn't live far from the corner of the main street. And I told my mother I was going to go meet this girl that was at school. And the next thing I woke up in Brockton Hospital, and I stayed there for 4 months. You know.
What was your
So
stay
in
like?
those days, the traffic wasn't like it is today. You could walk. But then sometimes I wondered why they let you outside so you could do those, you know. And I loved grape juice, and there was a little girl next to me in the hospital, and she let me taste it one time. And after that, the poor thing, she died, and I felt so bad. She had a brain tumor,
Oh, boy.
you know. The second time I got hit, Jim, I wanted to come home and let the fireman, there was a fireman there that his daughter finally married one of the, what do you call him, the Attorney General of Massachusetts. His daughter married the Attorney General of Massachusetts. And I said, no, I want to walk home. He said, no, you're not going to walk home. And that's how afterwards, when I was laid up in the living room for 3 months, I had a broken leg. Otherwise, my parents would have had to pay for all the stuff. Insurance company had to pay for it. Because she had double pneumonia. And all the kids from the 3rd grade came to see me at May. It was in May, and they brought me. It was Mayflower Day, and they all came and brought me May baskets. And I went back to school one day, and I was falling asleep, and the kids were laughing and pointing at me, and the teacher said, leave her alone, she's been sick. And they wanted to wake me up. So there's a lot of things that happened in your lifetime. 3rd grade came to see me at May. It was in May, and they brought me. It was Mayflower Day, and they all came and brought me May baskets. And I went back to school one day, and I was falling asleep, and the kids were laughing and pointing at me, and the teacher said, leave her alone, she's been sick. And they wanted to wake me up. So there's a lot of things that happened in your lifetime. We used to have to wash the clothes. My sister Angie washed the clothes for all of us in a bathtub with a scrub board. Then when she got married in '39, because most of them were gone by then, I had Carmi, my sister Carmi, and my brother Jerry, and my mother and father home, but I had to do it. And my husband Joe used to come and visit me and see me, and I'd be scrubbing clothes with high heel shoes on, scrubbing the clothes in the bathtub, and then have to take them out and hang them on the line. But that's the way we had. My mother had a wash machine in the attic hallway, but she was afraid we'd hurt our fingers. And she wouldn't let us, they used to have ringers in them.
Mm-hmm.
You'd hold the clothes up, and she was afraid we'd catch our fingers. It was all right to break our back, though. School was great. I loved my teachers. I used to stay after school and stay with my teachers. And then my sister Connie came along, was in the 1st grade. And she'd cry every day. We only could have hit the house with a stone. And she cried she wanted to go home, and I used to get out in the corridor and tell her, Carmi, we didn't call her Carmi till after she got married. Her name, we called her Maya. I'm going to kill you when we get home. She takes me out, and you take me out in this corridor every day, and the janitor would say, poor thing, she's scared, she wants to go home. But after a while, she got to like school. But every day I got called out, Maya wanted to go home. But your father did the same thing when he was a kid. Oh, God. And I remember the day that John Kennedy was assassinated. I was working down the Hilltop restaurant, and I came home, and on the way home I stopped to tell Jerry's teacher, Miss Cusick, and she said, we heard that he got assassinated, but we didn't want to say anything to the kids because they didn't want to upset the kids. Kennedy had got upset. That's why I have all the original Kennedy papers, magazines from back in 1963.
Yeah.
The Life magazine and all them that came back out then.
Yeah.
I have them all.
Yeah.
All his books. When we were kids, my mother and father talked Italian.
Yeah.
And because as my older brother went to school, he came home and learned how to talk English, so we learned for him. And as the kids grew older, and they all went to school, one by one, we all learned English, and my parents learned how to speak English, so by the time we grew up, my mother and father were talking fluently in English.
Yeah.
You know, and today they have to have special classes for people from Asia and different countries so we can teach them English, which puts a lot of strain on the school committee. It does, because then they have to have money to teach all these people English. When I came to Randolph, Canton Street was all wooded area.
Yeah.
And when we used to go out at night during the war, we'd take our high heels off and walk by the woods with no shoes on. So in case anybody was hiding in the woods, they wouldn't hear our clickety-clack going down the street. And we'd take our shoes off.
Yeah.
So later on, during the war, I learned how to drive, and I sent my husband a letter telling him I was now a registered driver of the United States highways, mass highways. So one night I was coming home, and I dropped my girlfriend off, and a car was following me, coming up South Main Street. So bright-eyed me, I just drove right around the corner, went up the street, and right into the parking lot of the police station. And got these fellas arrested because they were tailgating me and following me home. So precaution, you have to look and see who's behind you. They're trying to tailgate me and whack me with their car, knock me off the road. But when I was driving, I came to a stoplight, and I was a daredevil in my day. I had to be the first one that zoomed it off and took off in the car at the lights. But I was very nervous about being a car if somebody else drove it, because I was always afraid after I got hit by a car twice that somebody's going to hit me and kill me. And I never liked to stay home alone by myself. My husband always made sure that when he went out that somebody was there with me. Like he used to say to my daughter-in-law, Laurie, make sure you stay home because Natalie doesn't like to be in the house by herself. So after my husband died, I came home that day, and I said to my grandson, Bobby, will you stay with me tonight? And he says, yes, Nan, I'll stay with you tonight, but I can't do it all the time. So I've been here now 16 years this coming March. And I get it so you like it by yourself. You can eat when you want and do what you want when you want to do it. You have no time limit to do anything. But the only thing I wish people would do, and we say things when we're alive it makes alive that you get sorry for, is like I used to tell my husband, you'll be walking over my grave when I be pushing up daisies, because his family had a long lifeline and my family didn't. And I said, I regret saying that, because now I've lived longer than anybody in my family, and mostly in my husband's family. But you got to be careful of what you say when people are alive, because it hurts you afterwards. It hurts you yourself. Then it probably hurts them. They probably don't even think that you said that, But God's blessed me, Jim. I had a good life, and I had good kids, and I had wonderful grandchildren, and I always tell Papa and the Lord to watch over my great-grandchildren, because they're the pressure was on. They're young. Not too many of them have hit the teens yet. But the world has changed, and I heard one time that drugs is going to do more to this world than the nuclear bomb, and it has. It split up more families, more kids are being taken care of their grandparents and their relatives than before. People used to live together, big families, grandparents and kids and stuff. But today the grandparents are taking over the families and not living with the younger ones aren't living with the grandparents. The grandparents are taking care of their kids. Years ago, it used to be the children would take care of the grandparents. And now the grandparents are raising two families, their own and their kids, because the kids can't handle it. It's the drugs. It's crazy. Well, I had a dog, Commando, and your father had Ishheimer and Max. But Grandpa always favored Ishheimer over my dog.
Oh, really?
It's because when you kids were little, Jim and Jared were little, Grandpa tied the dog to the doorknob in the hallway connecting the two houses, and the dogs used to fight. So I kept telling him that when he passed on, he was going to come back as a dog. So after he died and he passed on, there was a girl upstairs named Amy that had a golden retriever, and a girl, Valerie, that lived in the house that my son Jerry built for his in-law apartment, had a golden retriever. Well, Amy's dog, the minute she moved in, he came over and hugged me and kissed me and was so friendly with me. He was beautiful. He was light tan golden retriever. And I said, oh my God, My husband came back as a dog. The one over Valerie's house, he's ugly golden retriever, and he growled at me all the time. But I really thought, I used to say to him, Joe, when you die, you're going to come back as a dog. Because he's always yelling at him. I tell him to lay down. But Ishheimer and Max, they were fine, you know. But the dog got angry because he was tied up.
Yeah.
Well, the first time I heard about computers was when all my children had computers, and I figured I'd like to have a computer.
Yeah.
But electronics is way above me, and I have to work at it for a while. I have to find more time to spend on my computer. Even though I'm 89 years old, my life seems to be filled, and I love my television set. When I was a little girl, I never knew about a Christmas tree. We didn't have Christmas presents. We didn't know it, that we got Christmas presents. Never had a tree until after I got married and I came to the Sass family and they had a Christmas tree. But it never went without one after that. So we never did.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things we didn't have as kids. But we had each other, so we had a good time. Well, I go to bed at night now and think about what I'm going to do the next day. And if I don't do it, I feel guilty, so I do it.
Yeah.
I try to stay up late so I can fall asleep because I'm used to going to bed at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning and waiting on table. And I just can't say at 9 o'clock I'm going to bed because I can't go to sleep.
Yeah.
And if I go to bed too early, then when I wake up in the morning, I don't want to get up because I'm tired because I stayed up the night before. I don't want to go to bed, and then I don't want to get up.
Yeah, yeah.
But everybody tells me, Jim, that I do great for somebody my age.
Oh, I agree.
89 years old, and I still clean my own house, and I do my wash and do everything, wash the floor and stuff. Most people have somebody helping them.
Yeah.
Thank God for my life. I had a good life. So that's why I tell you kids, don't cry about me when I'm gone, because I had a good life. God's been good to me.
We're still gonna cry though. I mean, it's kind of inevitable.
No, and I just want you to know that's why I tell my kids, don't put flowers on my grave. I can't see them when I'm gone. Bring them when I'm alive, and that's what they're doing. I'm fortunate, Jim, because you kids all come to see me and stuff, and a lot of kids never go see their grandmothers and stuff.
Yeah.
Everybody tells me I'm lucky to have so many kids come see me. So I'm happy.
Yeah.
I just think that we all get to the point where we can't do what we used to do. It's like a car. You buy a new car and it goes for a while, and then after a while it gets rusty. Same with the human body,
Yeah.
You can't do what you did 20 years ago or 30 years ago. My mother had 2 brothers.
Yeah.
No, she had 3 brothers. But that isn't what she had 3 brothers, but one brother had 2 sons, and I got to know them. One was named Louis and one was named Natal. That's why I was named Natalie, because Natal means Christmas in Italian, and I'm the girl's name for Natal. So Louis was a great filmmaker. He wasn't a filmmaker, he was a clothes maker. He designed clothes for Al Jolson and all the big movie stars. He had a big clothing store down in Fort Lauderdale. But this guy from Randolph named Bossy that owned a store, he used to have a tailor shop down North Randolph, taught him when he was real young. So he went to Florida and he had this big designing place down there. But my cousin, the child, came up and stayed with my mother a while. And one day, he was crossing the street in front of my mother's gas station when my husband was in the service, and he got hit by a car. So he was up the Brockton Hospital, and he died. And I went to see him because he was all hooked up on life-preserving safe and stuff. But anyways, my cousin Louis sent the money to his mother in Italy. And he'd even put a big headstone on his grave. And he only has a small little headstone there in Calvary Cemetery. But my mother took to my cousin Louie more than she took to my cousin Natal. Because he was made a big deal of my mother, where my cousin Natal was just one of us, you know, nonchalant. But he liked to drink too. Crossing the street that day, that was terrible, right there in front of the Barking Hospital when he died. He got killed. But I always made sure that I went to his grave when I was able to. Every Memorial Day, I went to his grave and put a flower on his grave. He was buried right behind Paula's house, right there.
Yeah.
Oh, if you cross that little brook in Paula's house on Barton, you would step right onto his flat stone there. He had a little flat stone that was about as big as a book, and it had his name, and I used to have to cut all the grass off and everything, get down to cut it off. But that's what my mother's maiden name was, Fiorentino, and that's what their last name was Fiorentino. They had the same name because my brother, her brother's names were Fiorentino, and her maiden name was Fiorentino. It's Fiorentino, Fiorentino. And because my mother went down to visit him a few times down in Florida when he had that big store down in Fort Lauderdale. Well, I have a brother-in-law named Bud Welding. There was a big fire back years ago with the Coconut Grove in Boston. And he lived in Quincy in Wollaston, Mass. And he had two sisters that died in the Coconut Grove fire. They all went there for a party one night, and the ornaments on the wall caught fire, and the place burned up, and the whole 200 people got burned to death there, and two of them was his sisters. So after that, they passed a law that you couldn't have decorations hanging from places. Why I bring this up is because I love to dance, and I always said that when I died, I'd like to come back as a chorus girl and dance. And it's funny, I worked with this girl in this club that I worked in, and she helped me I was waiting on table, and she was making the pizza. And she told me one night, you looked at her, she looked just like a middle-aged woman that probably liked to crochet and stuff. And she told me her husband played in the band as a violin player at the Coconut Grove, and she used to be a dancer at the Coconut Grove. And she used to tell me how she'd have to get up in the morning and take this young fella that lived next door to her to hockey practice in the morning because his mother died and his father was in the Navy. He grew up to be one of the biggest Canadian hockey players, Rod Langway. And they lived right down the street from me, about 2 minutes from the street, and she did. And then her husband was out cutting the grass one day, and she heard the lawnmower rolling, and he had dropped dead cutting the grass. But the Langways grew up and made the name for themselves in the hockey league. So it goes to show you never know who's living next door. Some little kid that you see knocking a ball around or something. So my point is in life, show people the respect and love you have for them when they're alive. I remember saying to this girl up the street, her sister-in-law died, and she was only a young girl, maybe in her early 20s, but she was a little slow, and I said to her, how come you're not crying for Shirley? I was only about 10 years old, and I was very inquisitive, and she just died, and she said to me, you know, Natalie, I was good to her when she was alive, and I don't have to cry for her when she's gone. So if you're good to people when they're alive, and you respect them and love them, then you don't have to cry for them when they're gone. True, right?